What does this term woke right mean to you? And can you break it down at how it's used?
Well, since you just invoked the magic word of spectrum, I also am a bit spectral, if we will spin a pun here. So I am a little bit on this spectrum. I'm a mathematician, right? And so a lot of people have asked me through the years, well, what in the world does math have to do with analyzing Marxism or political currents or world politics or whatever else? And the answer that I give, obviously analyzing and cutting through the BS of Marxist writing and Marxist thought, the answer that I give is that mathematicians are obsessed with definitions. We really are. Because if you get a definition, if you observe some mathematical phenomenon and you want that to be the subject of a paper, let's say, or whatever, and you define that term a little bit wrong, nothing works. Because with math, everything is like ice cold mechanical logic, right? Once you have the axioms, once you have the definitions, every logical consequence is already there. It already follows. You
Can I
just have
can
to
I
figure
say,
out what
'cause
they
I
are.
was an accounting major, and the point is when you have your balance sheet, if it's a penny off, you can't just be like, "Ah, it's just a penny." It's like, "No, no, 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 no.
You
That mean
find the
it could be
penny.
$100 as well. It's some mistake I made somewhere, and that
That's
one
right.
penny could be $5,000 here and 4,999 on the other side." So
Yeah.
it's exactly like what you're saying.
Yeah. So we're really precise with definitions. So when I use a term like woke right, you can trust, and I'm not saying it like Trump believe me. I've actually demonstrated this throughout my entire career. It's a repeated pattern for the pattern noticers out there. They can notice this pattern is that I have thought about how that term should be defined and how that definition creates implications
Okay.
before I start using a term. I do use a lot of stuff glibly, but some people can't tell the difference, but not everybody's, riding the full length school bus. That's okay. Uh, so woke means something very specific, and I've been beating this drum for years. So we got two terms, woke and right,
Yeah.
in the phrase woke right. Somebody accused it of being an idiom. It's not an idiom. An idiom is a saying where you can't
Right.
derive the meaning from the words,
It's
like
raining
don't
cats and
put your
dogs.
cart before
Yeah.
the horse. Yeah,
Yeah,
raining
yeah.
cats and dogs. Like you're looking around. My very literal daughter at one point was like, "Why are we talking about horses now?" When I said, "Don't put your cart before the horse."
I was
Right.
in North Korea, and we went to the greenhouse where they have a Kim Il Sungya plant named after one's an orchid, and a Kim Jong-ilia plant, one's a begonia, and we had to sign the guest book, and someone wrote, "Venus flytrap, eat your heart out." And my guide says, "What does that mean?" Now try to explain the term Venus flytrap to a North Korean, and then try to explain "eat your heart out." I sat there, I'm like, "This expression makes absolutely no sense on any level."
Yeah, well, it turns out that happens in every language.
Yeah, of
There's I
course.
sometimes have been to China, and the translator is translating some guy. If you get a really good translator, they get everything, an interpreter. But then sometimes I'd have translators that were, kind of middle level, like HSK3 or whatever, and they would be like, "Yeah, what he just said is some Chinese idiom about bulls, and I don't have the slightest idea what it actually refers to." You know, and so you're just gonna have to nod and, give thumbs up and do your best to figure out what he wants. And so it's just how it is. So anyway, woke. Woke means having awakened. Duh, woke, awake. This is, you know, let's not complicate the matter here. Woke means having awakened to uh, a view of reality that is based on structural oppression. And in particular, that oppresses people like me to the exploitative benefit of people like them.
Right.
That's all woke means. Reality is the left woke calls it critical consciousness. You now have a critical consciousness of how the world is organized, but it's an oppressor versus oppressive dynamic, and that the belief is that the world, in fact, everything in the world, it's a metaphysical worldview. It is
Yes.
not. It's not like some beliefs. It is a when it's all the way there. It's not that everybody gets the whole thing or knows that they're in it. It's a full blown lens for how you view and interpret reality
Can I
around you.
say something? Because there's something I
Yeah.
think conservatives don't get. Because conservatives are like, "Why do you keep talking about race?" It's like that's like saying, "Why do you keep talking about the Constitution?" It is literally the basis for your worldview. There's
Yeah.
nowhere else to go. Everything has to be viewed through the, like you said, lens. And in some sense, it's a form of Gnosticism. This
That's right.
form of hidden knowledge that once you are initiated into the mysteries, you realize everyone else is asleep, right, or clueless. It's their version of being red pilled.
That's right. That's exactly right. And everybody else has false consciousness or they're
Yes.
asleep or whatever. Yeah. So woke means having woke up to the true structure of reality. And it's actually structured by systems of power that generate oppression. And it's always this kind of like victim mentality is built right in. So it's in identity politics. So it's people like me who are oppressed, unless you have like the white guilt thing. And then it's like people like those poor victims are oppressed, with the empathy stick. And so woke means that. It doesn't mean left. And it doesn't mean necessarily believes in Marxist stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that care too much about race, although that's often implicated as part of the structural beliefs about reality. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you're pro-trans. It means that you believe that there is a oppressor-based structure to social reality that colors your entire interpretation of reality. Then you could add one further thing, because the woke actually do believe there's a duty of conscience that comes with this. The belief about oppression is that oppression is a dynamic. It's not that there's oppressor and oppressed as two separate things. They are two poles in a dynamic of oppression. So oppression creates an oppressed that's being done by an oppressor. So they're intrinsically linked. And the belief, at least from Marxism, from page, 2, I guess, of the Communist Manifesto, the main body of it, is explicitly that this is the engine. This is what it actually means for history to move. The entirety of human history is the history of the antagonism of classes. And so the oppressor versus oppressed is actually there in that first paragraph. So woke means that you woke up to this. Okay, fine. Well, what does woke right mean? Well, we often think of it as woke left. I've been actually being much more precise for a couple of years and saying woke woke Marxism to describe what I'm talking about on the left, because I think it is derived from Marxism. I would Woke right is kind of this.
Wait, isn't it
It's
explicitly derived from Marxism? The Foucault and all them, they were explicitly taken from
I think
Marxism, no?
so. I think so.
I
People
thought they were pretty
argue.
explicit about it.
They are quite explicit
Yeah,
about it.
okay.
And neo-Marxists were trying to revive Marxism that
Yeah.
wasn't taking hold in the West. The postmodernists had kind of given up on classical Marxist analysis, but wanted to do a new Marxist-style power analysis,
Yes. Yeah.
analysis of power and its manifestation through the more subtle aspects of life, like language and the structure of language and so on, as post-structuralism. And so yes, it's derived from Marxism. So woke right are the basic definition is going to be people who act like the woke, although this is a very weak definition. People who act like the woke, same tactics, same victim mentality, same identity politics, same poor me, same, kind of very instrumental use of language, very instrumental use of knowledge, of concepts, of lies, that means justify the end. So lying and smearing and canceling and struggle sessions are all on the table in order to gain ideological growth or consensus, but also to gain obviously power. And so, but that do so using so-called right-wing traditionalist values. Now, this error has been made in history, and it's extremely well documented by some of the people who made this error, because I think it is an error to pick up, so to speak, the ring of power here, to say, well, what the left is doing is working, so I'm going to do that too, even though it's plainly evil. And that error is most thoroughly documented by a very proud German man named Adolf Hitler, who wrote repeatedly that he did this. Mein Kampf talks about it. He says repeatedly that he's the one who's actually going to execute Marxism, and he's going to get rid of the parts that don't work, but he's going to execute Marxism. So in other words, woke
Execute
right,
meaning put into practice, not kill.
correct.
Okay, just to be
Well,
clear, yeah.
probably both,
Well,
honestly,
both,
but
yeah, sure, sure,
yeah,
yeah.
but yes, put into practice. And so, in in truth, woke right is like a piss you off slang term, and they're going to probably clip that and run with it, but it is. That's part of the point. Is, if Sun Tzu said, if your enemy is of choleric temper, irritate him. And so woke right is like a piss you off slang term that means neo-fascist, where the
Okay.
neo here plays the same way as neo plays in neo-Marxist. It's a new theory. It's not the old, early 20th century stuff, but it's this same reaction that, and this is how you can summarize that reaction very simply. Communism basically puts out this sales pitch. There's this oppressor versus oppressed dynamic. The oppression is evil. We're the only people who understand it. So we should get in power and have all the control, and we'll end it. And fascism is a reaction that says, actually, the communists believe this and they're right. reality is structured that way. There is oppression, but that's what held society together. So we need to do more of it.
Okay.
And so the woke right are people who, in some measure or another, have bought into this. Now, they choose different locuses for the power structure. Some of them have this very kind of intellectual concept called the post-war or post-World War II liberal consensus. Some of them just stick it in Israel. Some of them expand on that and say that it's the Jews, and that's spelled Joos, Jews, the Jews.
It's
And
usually with a
those
Z.
well, it can end in a Z. That depends
Yeah.
on how flippant we're being. But these lock together, right? They're interlocked because the post-war liberal consensus in the very respectable side's telling, and I don't think most of these guys do much anti-Semitism, and they're telling part of the post-war liberal consensus was we're going to prevent the rise of fascism. We're also going to prevent the rise of Hitler. We will not have another Holocaust, and therefore we also have to build Israel as a safe haven for the Jews. They may not jump in and say, and it's an ethno state, and that's terrible, blah blah blah. They have other purposes with it. So there's this interlocking aspect between these kind of different factional beliefs, sort of like CRT and queer theory are not commensurate but interlocking beliefs through intersectionality. And the intersectional faction became the solution to those infights between the various leftist groups. We're not to the synthesis part of that fight, I think, with this neo-fascist woke right movement. But neo-fascist would be a more respectable, calm, let's not piss people off just to piss them off term for it. But it's not meant to be confusing. And for me, it was confusing that people were confused because I'm very clear in my definition of woke. The
Okay.
word that I don't think fits is right. I don't think these people are on the right because they run a leftist operating system, a leftist metaphysical worldview, but they're doing it in the name of traditional values. Where Marx said in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, he says, all the revolutions of history draw their inspiration from kind of a romanticized past. But for him, the difference is that Marxism draws its inspiration from a romanticized future.
Right.
Uh, these guys are the characters that he's talking about. They're the old Hegelian, transformers of history, but transforming it into a rigid hierarchical structure of what they think they already have.
I think one of the reasons you might be confused or not is I think you underappreciate to what extent human beings see things not through a true false filter, but through an us them filter.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
since
No, no,
woke
that's totally.
six woke is them and right is broadly speaking from their perspective us, even the bad parts of the right. Your term is what's it called, something self contradictory, like military
Yeah,
intelligence.
self-contradictory.
Yeah, what's the paradox, not paradox, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Oxymoron.
Oxymoron. It's an oxymoron. That shows how stupid you are because everyone knows woke means left and we're right. So how could they be that? So
Ha-
that's how they reason. It's just simple as
well,
that.
that's where we get into the conspiracy theory side because maybe, maybe this isn't even all that organic. Maybe it's paid for by the same people, like with
Right.
World War II, where the fascists and the communists were paid for by the same people. Um, which is I'm not gonna I don't have proof that that's happening. I would strongly suspect that it's happening, that if you have bad actors who have global ambitions and the tool that they've been using is, say, the left, and then the left runs into actual serious opposition that it may not be able to overcome. It's like I've said before, if we're boxing and I keep punching you with my left hand and I get you to just watch my left hand, you're getting knocked out with my right because you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
looking for it. And I would switch gears.
yeah.
They don't the goal for if there is a global plot, let's put it that way, we'll avoid the tinfoil hat. If there is a global plot, the plot is to get liberty out of the way, is to get the Constitution of the United States as a kind of practical measure out of the way. It doesn't matter really how you do it. It doesn't matter if you use, just saying strictly on the left, pure communism, or if you say import a bunch of Muslims who are not communists because they break the hegemony of Western values. It doesn't matter which tools you use, right? And so if the leftist agenda is now starting to backfire and prevent you from achieving your actual goal of dismantling individual liberty, then you step in and come at it from we're the only true reaction that can fight this off. And of course, it's actually designed to dismantle the Constitution as well. And so Whether or not that's what's happening, I would suspect it is. I don't have hard proof. I don't have statements from Klaus Schwab saying something like, "If we cannot get it through the left, we will get it through the right."
Right.
He has never said anything like that to my knowledge. But this is that's what I mean by the term anyway. And I don't so let's do the semantic thing too, just to put it on the table. Maybe the term sucks. I totally get the oxymoron thing, right? And I totally get that it's literally an in your face glib, middle finger actually to the people doing this, because calling them woke seems to be like they got a bee sting on their eyeball or something. They just flip out. Maybe it's not the best term though. Maybe neo-fascist is the best term. Maybe woke fascism is the best term. Maybe there's some other term. Who knows? Right. But the fact of the matter is that I think what we need to start to agree on, regardless of what we call it, is that the phenomenon is happening. Lines should be drawn around it. And we need to have serious conversations and debates about whether or not that's the right direction to go, which I think it is not.